Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Fleming, and I am the sales manager at Advantage Business Systems with specific responsibility for Microsoft Dynamics GP. I'd like to welcome you to one in a series of webinars that we're running at the moment, which is all about trying to increase efficiency around Dynamics GP, whether that's through the use of new features in the product like Dynamics GP 2016 Workflow, or whether or not through add-on solutions. So a month or so ago we looked at Spindle, Credit Hound for cash collection, making sure you guys could get money in. We're here today to talk about electronic document management with our friends at KwikTag, and we've got Mary on the line who's going to take over from me in a couple of minutes and take us through an overview of the product. The guys at KwikTag, or KwikTag, have been working with us on document management for some time. We're going to talk today about some of the obvious things that document management provides in terms of the automation and consolidation of scanned images, sort of an electronic filing cabinet. The guys are also going to talk a little bit about OCR, the use of workflow within document management, which is something people often don't realize is there. And then obviously everybody on the call today has got Microsoft Dynamics GP. So the fact that you can actually use a full feature document management solution, which you can then attach to electronic records in Microsoft Dynamics GP, is a big benefit. So the guys are going to take us through those in a bit more detail. And as I say, we'll either jump in with questions as they're relevant or keep them to the end. The objective of today really is, or the objective of the webinars that we've been running, is just to try and increase people's awareness of some of the functionality that is available for Dynamics GP. And it's around the elements that are close to all our hearts in terms of our solutions, in terms of financial systems, making sure the information that we've got is secure, reducing the amount of errors through manual intervention, automating workflow, making sure that the right information goes to the right people at the right time. The amount of time involved in that process is reduced, making sure you've got control over the process, who's doing what and when, and increasing visibility. All of those things will help to reduce the cost, your costs going forward. So that's what we've tried to do in terms of these webinars. We've got a few other webinars coming up, another 2 or 3 over the next couple of months, which are all part of this series, which you'd be very welcome to join us on, and we'll touch on them at the very end. But that's me. It's a very quick introduction, but most of you guys on the call know me already. So what I will now do is I will pass control to Mary with a touch of a button.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. Fantastic. Okay. Okay, fantastic. So, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that your goal with this conversation, as well as your other messages, Matt, is that, you know, we're looking to reduce the cost and save time. And ironically, I have a few data points that support that with, you know, some research. Of course, we see this from, you know, our 1,000+ customers over the 20 years that we've been doing this. But the good news is that, you know, a lot of people can validate this information and have access to the industry research that supports these numbers as well. And, you know, the reality is that 70% of businesses, especially mid-sized businesses, would fail within 3 weeks if they suffered a loss of paper records that was due to fire or flood or some other sort of natural disaster. And, you know, so of course that's the worst possible case scenario and the extreme of that, and God willing that doesn't happen to any of us with our businesses, you know. But then there's the reality of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis, the people that run up and down the halls and across town, you know, with their courier and filing things in boxes and pulling them out of file cabinets. And, you know, most companies that I know don't have a line item for that in their budget to account for that, what actually equates to about 30% of their time. In fact, some research today supports that it's 30 to 40% of a typical employee's time, especially if that person is in, say, accounting or HR or some sort of back office operational role. And the reason for that is that's where the paper lives. The paper problem starts with those that are, receiving the envelopes in the mail, that have the invoices stacked on their desks. And, 20 plus years ago in a former life, I was actually an account payable manager for a company that had exactly that scenario. So I only wish I knew then what I know now in terms of having the efficiencies that are available to us today. So 30 to 40% of people's time is spent chasing around looking for information. And to add fuel to that fire, no pun intended for the disaster standpoint, but the data is growing. The documents are growing exponentially every year. 22% actually is the rate at which paper increases year over year. So if you're a mid-size organization, the amount of paper in your business is likely to double within a 3-year time. If you're a larger organization, that's going to be even faster. So think about, the number of filing cabinets that go down the rows today outside of accounting, outside of HR, outside of legal. If there was a way to make all of those papers go away, knowing that the document volume is going to increase, you'll be in a much better place, much more efficient if you have those things digital already. And then there's the hard cost, the dollars and cents, that it costs about £100 for locating a misfiled document. And if you have to go back to the source and, heaven forbid, have to replace it from its beginning, that adds up to about 280 to 320 pounds per document. So there are true hard costs associated with the paper that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in our job. So, why look at doing anything about that, in terms of systems, right? So what are some of the things that we can do about that? Well, at ImageTag, we have this approach of one system that can make all of that go away. And we do it through 3 simple steps. And those steps are capture the document. So the first thing that we have to do is get rid of the paper, capture the document. Now, there's about 14 different ways that you can do that, probably more, but those are the ones that we track. Many people choose to scan documents to get them into KwikTag. Many people email them in. We even go so far as to recommend you work with your vendors with a best practice of sending them in straight from the source, if that's at all humanly possible. So we can give you direct email addresses, for example, to say, vendor A, send to this email, and it's going to come straight into KwikTag. I'll show you that in a second. It's pretty slick. And I'm not just saying that because I work here. It's really exciting stuff. So we capture the documents, get rid of the paper. The next thing that we do is we integrate with the core systems that are part of your business, the ones that you rely on day in and day out to run your business. Now, in this specific case, we're going to talk about Dynamics GP because that's the system that we're most likely integrating with from an accounting standpoint. From a process standpoint, there are a lot of other areas. We'll talk about those in a minute. But the next thing that you want to do is automate. Again, efficiency is all about automation. Whatever you can do to make something digital and reduce the number of manual touch points in that process, the more efficient you're going to be, the more savings you're going to realize at the end of the day. So capture the document, integrate it with your core systems, and automate wherever possible. And we're going to take a look at how that works. Now, I mentioned that accounts payable and HR are often areas that are burdened with a lot of these paper problems, boxes, file cabinets, and the like. But there are other areas of your business that once you have a system like this in place, there's absolutely nothing holding you back from walking down the hall and saying, hey, legal department, hey, sales order, hey, fulfillment, operations, customer data, all of that can also be stored in the same system. And once you've got it in place, your costs are very minimal. It's really just a matter of time and getting it going. Now, before I dive directly into the demonstration with GP, let me just talk a little bit about what you're going to see. Specifically within Dynamics GP, KwikTag is enabled on 75 plus different forms. It's actually about 80 now. What that means is that within a form in GP, you can simply click the additional menu and drag and drop, upload, gather a scanned document from wherever it is on the KwikTag server, and simply attach it to a record so that from that moment on, that document is attached to that record. Now, of course, you could delete it from that record and the document doesn't go anywhere. It still lives in KwikTag. But the reality is that when you just need to attach documents to specific transactions in GP, it's as simple as the little tag menu barcode that you see displayed in front of you. We have a very light technical footprint. We take up 0 GP resources. We live entirely outside of GP in our own separate KwikTag server so that it doesn't slow down your processing. We're not intermingling data, so your database doesn't have any risk for corruption or anything of the like. And we can, in fact, be as simple as your document management solution within GP, or we can have transactions automatically created for you if you use our workflow automation, and I'm going to demonstrate some of that today as well. And as I mentioned, of course, you can scale this to other departments, but the beauty of once you have documents and information living in KwikTag is you can find it. So think about that cost, right, of people running around the office and spending 30% of their day looking for information. The search capability in KwikTag is phenomenal. You can type in anything, whether you have physically put it into a tag, and I'll talk about what that means in a second, or if it's just content on the document. You can search anything within KwikTag at the individual document level or globally to find transactions. And then you can email them to other people in your organization or a vendor who might be calling looking for support or anything of the kind. So all of that enables you to quickly access your documentation, get your vendors paid on time, and get faster to close when you need to close at the end of the month, end of the quarter, and certainly at audit time. That search capability comes in very handy as well. So those are just some of the screens that you're going to see as we take a dive into the GP interface within KwikTag. So this is what I'm going to show you in a moment here is this screen that you're seeing now that's layered on top of the GP screens is the KwikTag GP Pro client. Now, we have developed the GP Pro client. Let me just get out of here for 1 second. I'm going to come over to my demo environment. We have developed the GP Professional client to be very, very similar to GP. We built it so that it would essentially emulate the experience. We built this product for the accounting user, the person that comes in and feels the pain and has, you know, that stack of invoices sitting on their desk every day. Let me show you what I mean by that. It's a simple desktop application. So it's a Windows application. It runs in real time with a connection to GP. So the interface, the experience is that I'm the AP person. I come in the morning and I have this stack of invoices sitting on my desk waiting to be entered into GP. Now, remember I said that we built it to look and feel just like GP. So what's happening here is that this is the world in which we live, right? This GP experience is the world in which we live. We do our data entry here. We live and breathe in this environment. And so we don't want to have to deal with a lot of training, a lot of new experience, learning curve for our accounting staff. So what I'm showing you is an example of a transaction that I actually created yesterday. So I'm going to start with the end result so that you can see how easy it is to add documents to a transaction that already lives in GP. And then what we're going to do is take a look backwards and walk through how it got to this point. Now, if all I'm doing is adding a document to a transaction in GP, I simply come to this little additional menu that I just mentioned and showed you in the screenshot and tag documents, so I can add additional documents to this specific transaction. I'll show you that in a second. Or I can view ones that have already been associated with this particular transaction. So I set this up so that I'd be able to show it to you. When I started with this process, I had the invoice, which was routed around for approval and automatically created this transaction that you're looking at. Well, then after the fact, yesterday I came in and said, you know, I've got that packing slip I need to add to it, so let me just drag and drop that over. So now today I can come in and say, you know, I've got this other thing that I need to add to it. And so it doesn't matter that it happens yesterday, today, next week, next year, whatever. I simply can browse out to my desktop browser. And maybe I want to just drag and drop the quote over. I don't need a comment for this. It's okay. And I cancel that. And now I have another document forever and always attached to this specific GP transaction. Okay, so now how did it get there? Well, as I mentioned, we introduced the GP Pro client. So I'm the AP user and I come in every morning and I've got this stack of invoices. I wish there was only 25. You can all probably relate, or at least somebody on your accounting team can relate. And you know, I have this view of how many things I have in various stages. So I can see that I have 25 things to tag. I've got 7 things that require some sort of edit. Maybe it's a GL adjustment, maybe it's just a review. And I have 3 things waiting for me to approve. I can also see how old they are. So this gives me a sense of urgency, right? I can change this if I need to. Maybe your business rules are that you want them to be, in a 30-day time frame that things need to be addressed. So I can adjust that threshold if necessary. But I instantly have visibility to what's priority, what I need to address first. Okay, so let's take a look at our invoices that are waiting to be tagged. So I've sent a number of invoices, and as you can see, I can scan through these very quickly. I've got some quotes here. I've got some invoices. I have packing slips, other things that I might need to address. But let's take a look just at a simple invoice. I right-click, and what I now am presented with is an option. I have 4 different options for workflows that I could then send this invoice on. So we're going to take the path of invoice approver selection. Well, what that means is that I, Mary, the accounting person, knows the person that this invoice needs to go to for repair. Apparently not. Actually, for approval, we're going to find another one. We'll just right-click on this one. We'll select the approver there. I need to look at the quality of my images, apparently. But that's another story. So we're going to select the approver on this. And in some cases, you're going to have this issue where your accounting people know which invoices go to what person for approval, or what process they take, what route they take through the organization to get approved. In other cases, we're going to work with you to set that up in advance. Because again, it's about efficiency. The more steps that you can take out of the process that require manual intervention, the more efficient, the smoother the process is going to be. So what that means is that some of your workflows may say, if the invoice comes from vendor X, it automatically follows this path. Don't make me think about who I need to send it to. Just make it happen. Okay? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to select my Fabricam as my GP company that I'm working with. And as I did that, if you blinked, you missed it. But as I did that, you saw that several fields then illuminated. Now I'm going to come into my vendor lookup, and I'm going to come over here and do image makers. If I could type, that's the one. Again, good thing it's double checking my spelling. And just by selecting that vendor ID, you saw the majority of the rest of my header information populate. So I haven't done any data entry yet, folks. All I have done is select 2 different fields, the company ID that's associated with my GP company. And oh, by the way, if you're using multiple GP companies, the beauty of this is too that you don't have to then go back and log out a GP from one company into another. We're going to connect to the correct database here through our real-time connection to GP. So I simply select the company. I've selected the vendor ID with an automatic lookup into GP, and if anything changed in any of vendor cards, a new vendor is added, it's instantly going to show up here because, again, it's a real-time connection to GP that we're presenting you with. And now here's where my data entry begins. And boy, this is tough. I'm going to do a copy-paste, and I'm going to do MM, and I'm going to do 2303 so that we have a date reference there. And I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to enter the amount and hit Tab. So now I have done 2 pieces of data entry, one with a copy-paste and one by entering my purchases amount. Totally accelerated the time that it was going to take me to, A, find this invoice because it was instantly populated in my work queue for me. B, I selected 2 things for my initial data entry, company ID and vendor, and C, my document number and purchases amount are the only data entry I needed to do. Anything that I have as a default on the vendor card, shipping method, tax schedule ID, oh, by the way, this supports multiple different, currency types. Of course, you're going to want to select the British pound. We can change all of that. You can select a specific tax schedule ID if that's necessary for you. You could do a lookup for them. Again, all real-time connected to GP. If you happen to be using intercompany transactions, we support that as well. You simply click the box just as you would in GP. But for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to keep it simple. And apparently I did select a tax ID because now it wants to put them all in there for me. So I'm going to take that out and go back to the default here. And that's going to just reset everything for us. So we'll close out of this. I'm going to go back and say no to this. And actually, I'm going to just go back and start over because you probably want to see it again, don't you? So we're going to come in here and we're going to select approver selection again. And again, don't blink, you're going to miss it. It's super quick. We select the vendor, image makers, double click, document number, copy and paste, come over here, 2303, and put in our purchases amount. just so I don't mess anything up on the distributions. Now, when I click my distributions, you see that took a second, but then my GL distributions automatically displayed again, pulling through from the vendor card with whatever defaults happen to be associated in GP. No additional data entry required. I say OK, and in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select the approver because I know this has to go to our CFO. So I'm going to come down here, select Mary CFO as the approver, and I'm going to say OK to pay. And I have this little history button in the lower left-hand corner that shows that Mary, the AP person, is tagging this document and then is going to submit it for approval, and this will continue to build as it goes through the process. I simply click submit, and now this invoice is going out of my work queue. It's no longer on my desk. It's no longer waiting for anything to happen to it, and I'm going to log back in as Mary CFO so that I can quickly take a look and approve it. Now, you could have multiple different approver steps. You can have it go to a group. You could have it go to multiple different people. You could have it set such that somebody's away on holiday for a couple of weeks. If nothing gets responded to within, say, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever your business requirements allow for, then you can follow those workflow paths as well. So it's really about what does your business need in order to get things routed through the system and approved such that you're not holding up any of your accounting process and vendor payments. Okay, so I'll click on this third one here. That's going to be the one that we're working with. And you see this little notification I just got in the lower right-hand corner of my screen. I also received an email with that, with this document attached. I'll show you that in a second. Actually, let me just come over to that now since we're here. I open my email, and let's say that I'm traveling because I tend to do that quite a bit, and I'm on the road. This comes through to my email on my phone, and I can simply open the email. I can view the attachment straight from my phone or straight from my desktop or tablet or whatever device I happen to be on at the moment. I can scroll down in this email. I can see all of the data. If there's any additional distributions or comments or check information, you can have any field that is available to you in the GP transaction display here, okay? And then if I scroll all the way to the bottom here, you can see the GL codes. Now, I could just simply reply to this email with the word approve and send it on my merry way, and it'll be done. Or I can come back into the Pro client, or I could log into our web client and show it there. Because we're kind of demonstrating the specific features of the Pro client, I'm going to do it here so that you get that experience again, so that it's just like GP, not going to have to train anybody on anything new. I'll show you in this interface, but just understand there are lots of different ways that people could receive this information and approve it based on their role within the organization. Okay, now as I mentioned, the history is continuing to build, so it shows every step and who did what, date, time stamp, all of that. And the additional beauty of that is auditors come, right? They probably either just left or wrapping up their projects now, you know, from an annual audit standpoint. Maybe yours happens later in the year if you're on a mid-year fiscal. Once your auditors come in, you can give them a temporary license to search in KwikTag. They don't need to even access GP if you don't want them to. You give them a few invoice numbers, check numbers, vendors, whatever it is they need to look up. They simply find that information in KwikTag, see the audit trail history, view the document attached, see who did what, and they're on their merry way in a very short period of time. We've literally had people tell us that their audit has shrunk from 3 weeks to just a few days because they're in and out and they have nothing else to hang around for. So as the approver, again, I'm the CFO in this stage, and I can now approve, delegate, or reject. And again, for audit purposes and compliance purposes, if I reject it, I have to give a reason. Plus, this is going to go back to AP, and Mary in AP doesn't know what to do with it if I just reject it and don't tell her anything about it. So of course, I put a comment there. I can also delegate it. I can say, you know what, this is really Adam's budget. I don't want to have to take it out of mine. So I could send it over to somebody else. And in this case, we're just going to go ahead and approve it because everything looked good. And as you can see, the fields, once I clicked in on there, let me just go back there for a second, all of the fields are now grayed out. So if I had something to do with it, then if I had an edit step, as we call it, all of these fields would be editable. But since I'm just approving, it's simply a matter of taking a look, reviewing things, and then approve, reject, or delegate, and back to the daily work of that person. And then you can see now I only have 2 things left to approve in my queue. So what's happened with that transaction now? Let me come back over to GP, and what's happened is that the document has been coded by the person in AP, has been approved by the CFO, and it's going straight into GP. It's now waiting in what we call the KwikTag Work Queue in GP. Again, I go to that additional menu on a transaction. I come over to the KwikTag Work Queue simply by clicking that button. If I had purchase orders, I could view them up here as well, so I can see purchase orders on the top, invoices on the bottom. And this is now a list of all of the invoices that have been fully routed and approved through KwikTag. So those people don't need to be GP users, just so you know. They just need to be KwikTag users. And they can come in here and now the GP user says, okay, I need to create this payables batch because I have all these invoices that are approved and waiting to be paid. So you can see here's the one that we were working with. And if I hover over it for just a second, you see that I can view the GL codes that are associated with this transaction. If I right click, I can go ahead and view the document. If I wanted, you know, I'm OCD, I'm an AP person, I want to make sure I've got the right file. That's okay. So I select it, and then I could grab multiple, you know, checks or vouchers, put them in a specific batch together, or in this case, I'm going to just select the one I'm working with because somebody else might be working with those others and they might not be ready. Okay, but I select the one I want, I click create, I'm going to put it into a batch, and I can either select one that already exists, or I could create a new batch. I'm going to go ahead and put it in Mary's batch. And I made note of the fact that that invoice barcode ended in 1082. So we're going to close out of this, and we're going to come over to look up our batch. We're going to find Mary's batch and come down to the voucher number that ends in 1082 and select it. And now my transaction has been fully populated. All of my GL distributions are fully in place. Again, if you blinked, you missed it. And you can see the data displayed at the granular level. We'll close that. I'll come up to the additional menu, and if I click View Documents, now there's my invoice. Again, forever and always attached to this specific GP transaction. So remember where we started. We started by looking at one that I had completed yesterday so that I could show you how it, you know, the experience was in GP. And then we went back and we did the data entry. Took us about 2 clicks and, you know, 2 different pieces of drop-down information selection. And we sent it to an approver that could have done it on their phone, could have done it on a web client, could have done it in the Pro client, which is what we did together. And then this transaction was created in GP. And that probably took me about 6 times longer than it would take you because, of course, I was explaining what I was doing as we went through the process. But the reality is this happens in seconds. I'm telling you, when I was an AP manager, if I had this in place, it would have taken me, you know, a quarter of my day, and I could have spent time doing, you know, more financial analysis and more audit sort of preparation and more proactive work for, you know, working with our vendors. This is the kind of benefit is you can put people to a much more meaningful role within your organization than data entry, you know, and we're going to minimize some of the steps they even have to do for data entry because it's all very integrated and doing real-time lookups into GP. Now, remember I said we can always add documents to this, so again, we can come over here. Let's just say we're going to add a packing slip because we received that later or somebody in receiving sent it to us along the way. We can come over here and we can drag and drop the packing slip. It's going to say, yes, it's okay to send it to KwikTag. And again, this information is maintained. Remember, the resources that we're using are entirely in a KwikTag server. They're not taking up any space or muddling up any of the GP database. It's all done through our connector that attaches to this additional menu. And remember, I also mentioned that, let me just go back and show you this view documents. And of course, now I'm going to get the option to view a couple more here in a second. But we can do this from about 80 different screens. So maybe on a vendor card, you need to attach a contract. Maybe, you know, on an employee card, you need to add a new update to their benefits, to their insurance, to their pay rates, anything that might be a training or disciplinary action. You can attach any document just to make the paper go away by adding them through this additional menu. And then once we go to View Documents now, we can see that we have the original invoice as well as the packing slip that we added just a moment ago. So it's literally as simple as point and click, drag and drop, or if you are a scanner, if you have information that does come into you via mail, we give you those little barcodes just like what you see here. In the digital version, we'll give you a little sticker. You just put it on the paper and you scan it in wherever you like. It doesn't have to be scanned immediately because we're going to associate the barcode number. Let's assume this was a digital barcode in this case, but if it was a paper one, you would actually receive a roll of of what we call KwikTags. Shocking, right? And you could put it on the paper and scan it in at your leisure, and it's going to match those things up with reservations that you've created in KwikTag. Or if they come in, you'll automatically assign them to that reservation in KwikTag. So it's going to be very easy for you to find documents, whether you're in GP or in KwikTag to facilitate that. Now, let me just come back. Sure, we'll save it. Why not? Let me just come back over to the presentation for a second here, and we'll continue the conversation with some other options that you can do with KwikTag. So we've seen how it works in GP. We've seen how it works when you're adding documents specifically to a transaction, and we looked at the automated workflow that started with the GP Pro client within KwikTag. Now, some of you probably also have employees that travel on occasion, and they get these things, the receipts that they collect that they don't want to keep up with and that they have to, shuffle and dump on their desk when they return at the end of the week. As it happens, KwikTag can do that too. We simply take a picture with our phone, which is what you see here. We send in a receipt to KwikTag. It automatically creates the expense report for us. And again, I mentioned I travel. In the old days, I would come back from my trip and I would put together a spreadsheet, line item by line item, and say, I went to dinner with so-and-so over here, and here's how much it cost. Here's my hotel receipt. Here's how much it cost. All of which risked, fat fingering this, missing that, forgetting a receipt, losing something, getting AP mad at me when the corporate card comes in at the end of the month, and, then they can't find things. And this creates that for you automatically. You can see the report on the right, and then the line items here. All of that can get routed and approved, just like what I showed you within the invoice experience from an AP automation standpoint. So you don't have to go get another system for expense management. You can use the same one that you use for AP. And oh, by the way, a transaction gets created in GP at the end of this process as well, just like it does for an invoice. Often that's because you've got your employees set up as, reimbursable payees in GP, just like you would your vendors. So the end process of that transaction creation is identical to if it was an accounts payable invoice. But the reality is that you can now use the same system that you do for AP to get your expenses handled for those in your organization that might travel. So we've already done the demonstration of that. But let me just speak then to one other thing. If you work with a lot of purchase orders that come into your organization that need to be, in high volume typically, this is going to be more effective for you, that need to be matched against invoices once you receive the items that have been shipped to you. We have the ability now to receive those purchase orders, send them through our OCR process, extract the data that you can see here that's being highlighted in this particular view, which is the dollar amount. And you can see over on this line item, it's waiting for some information to come in so that it can create a match. As I zoom in on that, I can see that this line item has matched. It does, in fact, I have received the number of items that I had expected to. And it's just asking me to do a little bit of character validation. Is this an O? Is it a 0? Have some eyeballs look at it to make sure that the data is correct. But then the next thing that happens is that it sends it right back into the GP Pro client, the experience that we just looked at together. And you can see on this top line, the first one that came in has a partial match. But the second one, the one that we were just looking at together, which had that AOS, you can see it right here, is a match. So all of that information then is going to come over and be created just like the transaction was from the accounts payable standpoint, is now going to be here for you to process your purchase order. So once the invoice comes in, you just simply open that record in GP, you do the comparison. All of this information on the left was automatically populated through the OCR process, and you can quickly see that that data reconciles, and the process then continues just like it did from a completion standpoint with the AP automation. So as you think about the benefits and what this can do for your organization, is across your company, across all of the departments, your productivity increases because you can put people to more meaningful work. Your efficiency is going to increase because you're no longer chasing documents around. You're no longer looking for things in file cabinets and email and storage and running to the offsite storage and all of that. All of your invoices, all of your expenses, all of your reports, contracts, again, fill in the blank, human resources, whatever area of the business, are centrally located and easy to find within your ERP system and within KwikTag. And again, remember, they're stored in KwikTag. They're accessible through the ERP system. Your finance department, your managers have visibility through a simple search because we're actually looking at every piece of content on that file. We can search based on a word in the invoice. It doesn't even have to be something that we entered into a field. Okay, so they can find that. They have visibility throughout. And audit and compliance requirements are now met very quickly and very painlessly, so you're not pulling your hair out at the end of the time. And, you know, just a quick thought about why you would consider doing that with image tag. Well, we've been doing this for 20 years, and over those years we've built up 9 U.S. patents for the individual IP. One of those things in particular is that ability to search every single record, every single piece of content in that document to accelerate that search process for you. We are headquartered in Tempe, Arizona, so you know when it gets to be pretty cold over there in the UK in January and you need some place to come over and have some training, we're happy to spend some time with you around the pool, and I mean in the classroom, and training you on that sort of thing. And you know, the real value of working with a company like ours is that we started with integrating with GP, our document management. We started with making the paper go away. So we've been doing that for a very long time for a lot of different companies and a lot of different sizes and industries. But we, as a result, when our customers came back to us and said, we really want this to integrate with the systems that we work with every day, we have built the deepest integration into GP so that you can, as you saw, view, tag, search, add, create, all from within a click of a button that's connected to KwikTag. It just makes it a very powerful story, and you don't have to teach your users another system or another application. And then we added the process workflow application because our customers asked for it. Again, they said, all right, we've gotten rid of the paper, but now we still have these things that we have to, you know, email around, and what if somebody's away, and then we've got things lost and delayed, and our vendors are still getting mad at us. So we automated those processes that are most document intense and that are most painful for you to deal with on a daily basis. And we, you know, have more than 120,000 customers around the world that are using the software, so plenty of people for you to talk to and learn from and share your experiences with. And the great news about that is they keep coming back. So more than 98% of our customers come back, you know, year after year, which is a great testament. And this is just what I call the family photo. So, you know, a little bit of a picture of all different shapes and sizes and industries, but they all have one thing in common, much like all of you, that is they're dealing with paper. They've got paper in HR, they've got paper in accounts payable, they've got paper in legal, they've got paper in customer records, they've got paper in, you know, sales order and fulfillment. And we can help them make the paper go away and get rid of those costs and burdens that we talked about at the beginning. And these are just a couple of resources. Now I know Matt's recording this session, so you can get this, get access to this when we wrap up here today, or if you do a quick screen grab, you can check those out at your leisure. There's some additional white papers and resources and things that you can find on our website as well. But at this time, I would like to turn it back to Matt and see if we've got any questions or anything that you all would like to dig into or discuss further. I can go back to the demo if that's necessary. So what sort of questions do we have, Matt?
We've had a couple of commercial questions which we can take offline in terms of how the modules are structured, how KwikTag hangs together. We've also, you made a comment about halfway through, Mary, the fact that these are KwikTag users, not GP users. Are KwikTag users cheaper than GP users?
In most cases, I would say yes.
Okay.
Because it sort of depends. So that's a great question. Let me talk about that for a second. There's two types of users, right? The person that's doing that heavy data entry, the person that's going to live in the professional client, and then there's your typical approver that's going to get that email on their phone or log into a web browser from wherever they happen to be on whatever device they happen to be using. And the power user is going to be, you know, the more expensive, the more fully integrated user. The approver is going to be, you know, just sort of a reference user, a view user, and so that approver is a much less expensive experience, and they don't need all of the, you know, heavy lifting software. So there's kind of the user, and then there's the approver, and those things are structured a little bit differently because they don't need access to the same interfaces, the same client interfaces.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you wanted to try and why I mentioned we could take them offline was obviously it depends on client requirements and the type of users that they need and the mix of those users.
Absolutely.
Whilst everybody was quite keen to go to Arizona to sit around the pool, the question about training, obviously the guys are in the UK, they'd whilst we'd all like to come to Arizona, they'd rather not. I know we sold QuikTag to a number of UK clients using GP. Do you want to talk just quickly about how the training would work in that sort of situation? Because
yeah, sure.
Super.
Yeah, so in that case, what we'll do is you'll get a dedicated project manager, first of all, that will see through the moment you come on board as a QuikTag client. We'll work with you through implementation. And part of the training, you know, starts literally the minute you begin implementing your workflow, because we're learning about your organizational structure, your what we call workflow matrices, and, you know, your organizational hierarchy, who gets what, who approves where. So you start learning the flow of those sort of things, and we start learning the flow of those sort of things, so we can teach you how those how those data entry experiences work and how those approvals need to work. Then what we're doing is we're going to be building programs that as soon as each module of implementation is done, then your project manager will get on the phone, do a remote session live into your environment, and you know, bring everybody to your training room, of course, and, you know, have them do it either hands-on or through modular learning by watching us use your data as we train you on what we've done in your environment. And then finally, once that's complete, there are going to be a number of, you know, videos and materials. You'll subscribe to our newsletters. You can get access to those on an ongoing basis, whether that's just a simple tip or trick or knowledge base that you need to access, or if you need something, you know, more thorough where you want to walk through a video step by step with one or many people that are participating in that. And then we can do, you know, things like this too. If you need something more specific or more customized, then, you know, we can put together a bespoke webinar and train them via remote sessions such as this as well.
Okay, that's super. They were only the sort of 3 or 4 questions that we had. But I know a couple of the guys will want a follow-up session to talk specifically about their business and how they'd be able to use QuikTag. But that was really good. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for sitting through. I know it's not always easy talking for 45 minutes, Mary. I often find it hard to listen for 45 minutes, so thanks for sitting through the webinar. We have other webinars coming up later on next week on Dynamics 365. We also have webinars coming up next month on budgeting and forecasting. But your account manager will be in touch with you regarding QuikTag and whether or not you'd like to see any more of that product. But Mary, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for attending, guys. And as there's no more questions, I'll wrap that up there. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Matt. Cheers.